1960s, women were oppressed in almost every respect. Imagine not having the right to a credit card, to a birth control pill, to serve on a jury, to get an Ivy League education and experience equality in the workplace. Luckily for women, Representative Howard Smith proposed a law to end gender discrimination in the workplace in 1964. This law was called the Equal Employment Opportunity. Spoiler alert, this was not enforced!
The job field during this time was extremely limited, making it very difficult for women to make a living. The most common jobs for women were teachers, nurses, and secretaries. Women were believed to be incapable of working at the same level of men. It was often thought that women were not intelligent enough to be successful in a male-dominant field. Jobs such as nursing and teaching were considered women's jobs because they were nurturing and required more social skills than many men wished to possess. The Executive Order 11246 was put into place to prohibit discrimination of all aspects, including sex, race, religion, and national origin. This was a huge step for women because they were finally making progress. In the 1970s, the government was once again taking away the rights of women. Even though there was such thing as equal opportunity, the government went out of their way to limit the amount of women in the workforce. During this time, women who had children in preschools could not work in private practices. However, this idea was diminished in 1971. In the Phillips versus Martin's Marietta court case, which ruled private practices were no longer able to prevent women from working because of their young children. Another law which was implemented in an attempt to grant women the rights that they deserved is known as the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978. This act states that any woman who is pregnant or planning on pregnancy could no longer be denied a job. Previous to the act, not everyone had a wealthy husband who could provide for them. It was implied that the men in the house would work while the women could stay home and raise their children. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978 led to the term working mom.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope that of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
The poem, written by Maya Angelou, depicts the fight for black feminism. At just the age of 19, Maya Angelou produced the poem that spoke the words many women feared to say. She not only voiced her fight against racism, but also her struggles which she faced as a woman.
Women in the 1980s were limited in many aspects. They were not allowed to get a PhD in their field of study and were not allowed to accuse their husbands of rape. Women weren't denied rights just because they were women. Their movement, while it was making progress, was not even close to the rights that all the men maintained. Women were limited in their voice as they weren't properly represented in Congress, and in fact, still are not properly represented. In 1981, the Supreme Court ruled that excluding women from the draft is constitutional, meaning that women could not be drafted into the services just because they're women. These women were not evaluated for their strength and stamina as they should be, but instead generalized unfit and inferior to their men just because they were women. Though there has been some progress, that should have been accomplished years before the 1980s. In 1984, the Supreme Court case of Roberts versus USGC, the Supreme Court forbids sex discrimination in all organizations. This opened up many former all-male clubs to women, though women were still discriminated once they were allowed into the crew. Also in 1984, the Hishin versus King and Spalding Supreme Court case resulted in a law that prohibits sex discrimination in law forms that promote some based on their sex. Once again, this is a law that has not been entirely enforced because women are overlooked for promotion just because they are women. Finally, a huge setback to women occurred in 1989. In the Supreme Court case of Webster versus the Reproductive Health Services, the case resulted in the right for states to deny public funding for abortions and to prohibit public hospitals from performing abortions. This was a major problem for women because they could no longer get vital resources for their bodies funded by states.
The 1990s was a decade for laws and acts that protected women against sexism in the workplace and society. In 1994, the Violence Against Women Act funded services for victims of rape and domestic violence and allowed women to seek civil rights remedies for gender-related crimes. This act also provided training to increase police and court official sensitivities and a national 24-hour hotline for battered women.
A huge turning point in 1994 was when Congress finally adopted the gender equality in education to train teachers in gender equality. They were also taught to promote math and science learning by girls, counseled pregnant teens, and prevented sexual harassment. Currently, in 2015, there is still sexual harassment on a daily basis, so this part of the plan never actually succeeded. Finally, in 1998, Mitsubishi Manufacturing of America agreed to pay $34 million to settle an EEOC lawsuit contending that hundreds of women were sexually harassed. The company had to pay out to make these women stop the allegations against the company regarding sexual assault. This is similar to the Gender Equality in Education Act passed in 1994 because one of its goals was to stop sexual assault, which was unsuccessful.
In 2000, 36 years after the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, women still continue to experience discrimination in the workplace. At CBS, the huge broadcasting company, there was discrimination that was never actually admitted to. However, in order to cover it up and move on, CBS paid $8 million to settle the lawsuit. Good thing women could use the money to compensate for the lower pay they receive. In that same year, women also gained the right to sue their attackers, stranger, husband, boyfriend, whoever, in federal court. It only took multiple rapes to the same woman at Virginia Tech to finally fix this portion of the Violence Against Women Act. Despite some totally delayed court decisions and alterations to certain laws, this decade was a killer one for female empowerment. For starters, Dove began their campaign for Real Beauty, in which they started releasing a series of clips and short commercials that included social experiments, real models, and spreading the idea that every woman is beautiful. Then, Nancy Pelosi became the first female Speaker of the House, and Hillary Clinton became the First Lady to follow in the footsteps of her husband and run for president. She also became the third lady to become Secretary of State. From 2010 to today, we've had so many feminist movements and protests to make society aware of the problems that women still live with. Teenage girls across the country fight endlessly for the right to be able to dress however they please in school. School staff argue that the girls should not be able to wear shorts unless they're at a certain length or a shirt that it reveals a bra strap. It's not a secret, we wear bras. A girl can wear whatever she wants. The idea that it's too distracting for the boys around her, excuse me, you can't tell a girl to wear certain clothes to ensure the approval of a boy. If someone's distracted by a girl's shoulder, it's not the girl's fault. Oh, it takes away from the boy's education if he's distracted? What about all the class time that the girl loses because she's sent to the office to get a change of clothes? Do not let a girl feel bad for what she's wearing or how she looks. End of discussion. I'm going to let you in on another secret. All girls are not tall, blonde, and skinny. In fact, 99% of them aren't. In recent years, there's been a huge incline of plus-size models in the advertising business in an effort to understand that every body is beautiful. An extension of this movement is #DropThePlus, which was introduced into society as a way of normalizing all body types. Plus implies that it is not normal, the official website of the movement explains. Without the word plus, these women are just models, which is exactly what they are. So, while it is a great effort to include every type of woman into the modeling business, it's just as important not to segregate them into their own categories solely because of their size. I know I've been talking a lot about clothes, but it doesn't stop there. A fairly famous movement is Free the Nipple. Free the Nipple is an active fight against sexualizing women's bodies. Very similar to the dress code movement, Free the Nipple is all about women being able to wear whatever they want without the feeling of being threatened by predators. Rape and sexual harassment has always been an extreme threat to women, and Free the Nipple smothers the idea that she is just asking for it. The movement Take Back the Night works to make every person conscious and aware of sexual violence and harassment in an effort to stop it. Their motto, Shatter the Silence, Stop the Violence, shows how important it is that these topics are talked about to all people so it is eventually not a problem. The final and most important aspect of feminism today and in the past is gender equality. That's really what feminism is, the equal rights of both genders. The movement started
by famous actress Emma Watson, He for She is one of many movements that fights for equality of sexes. When it comes to feminism, just like any other topic, there are extremists that may get a little too crazy. However, it's important to understand if you believe that everyone is equal regardless of sex, you're a feminist. It's true, so embrace it because the movement still lives and has a long way to go.